There is a moment in every person's life when they stand at the edge of a decision. It may not look like much from the outside. Maybe it's waking up at 5 a.m. to train when your body begs you to stay in bed. Maybe it's saying no to junk food when your cravings rage like a storm. Maybe it's choosing to keep building your business day after day when no one claps, no one sees, and the money hasn't yet come. These are the unseen battles. The moments that define the disciplined from the distracted, the great from the forgotten. Discipline is not a mood. It is not a phase. It is a way of being. And yet, in a world built around comfort and convenience, discipline has become rare. We are flooded with endless entertainment, dopamine hits and distractions, algorithms designed to keep us weak and passive. But the human spirit was not forged in comfort. It was shaped in fire. And it's time to remember that. The ancient Stoics, men like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, Cleanthes, and Zeno, understood this better than anyone. They lived in a time when survival often meant hardship, and they responded not with complaints, but with courage. Their wisdom, written thousands of years ago, carries a message that hits harder today than ever before. They knew that the battle for greatness is fought in the mind, not against enemies with swords and shields, but against laziness, self-doubt, emotion, and fear. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor commanding legions of soldiers, wrote his private journal not for anyone else, but to remind himself how to live. He struggled, he failed, he kept going. His words were not polished for publication. They were battle notes to himself on how to remain disciplined while being surrounded by power, temptation, and chaos. "You have power over your mind," he wrote, "not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just a quote, it's a sword, and it will be your weapon in this journey. But discipline isn't built overnight. It's not something you download or manifest. It's earned, forged in fire and silence. You won't always feel motivated. In fact, most of the time, you won't feel like doing the work at all. But that's the moment where discipline is born, when you act despite how you feel. It's a quiet, powerful rebellion against your weaker self. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most revered Stoic teachers, taught that freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's being able to say no to what enslaves you. Think about that. How many people are chained to their emotions, their habits, their fears? How many people are prisoners to their own mind? Discipline is the key that breaks those chains. Not motivation, not inspiration, discipline. And what does that discipline look like today? It looks like showing up to the gym even when you're tired. It looks like doing the hard work when nobody is watching. It looks like saying no to the dopamine loop of scrolling and yes to the silence of focus. It's building something, your body, your business, your mental health, with patience and consistency, brick by brick, day by day. This isn't a motivational video. This is a manual, a blueprint, a philosophical sword sharpened by the Stoics and handed to you now in a world that desperately needs warriors of the will. Over the next few hours, we are going to dive deep into the Stoic path to unbreakable discipline. Each lesson will pull from ancient texts, modern examples, and timeless truths. We'll talk about training the mind like a muscle. We'll explore how to face adversity like a soldier. We'll discuss how to control emotion like a master. And we'll reveal what it really means to live with unwavering purpose. This is not just about becoming more productive. This is about becoming someone the world cannot break. A person who acts with clarity under pressure. A leader who doesn't fold when things get hard. A builder of mind, body, and spirit. That journey starts here, and it will not be easy. But you didn't come here for easy. You came to become unbreakable. Let's begin. Lesson 1. The foundation of discipline. Understanding what you can control. Discipline begins with clarity. Clarity of what we can control and what we cannot. This foundational truth is central to the philosophy of Stoicism and provides the groundwork upon which all personal mastery is built. Epictetus, a former slave turned profound philosopher, taught that some things are up to us and some things are not. Our opinions, aspirations, desires and actions fall within our control, but external events, other people's behavior and outcomes do not. When you truly internalize this concept, something extraordinary happens. Your mental bandwidth, once scattered across worries, begins to consolidate into a sharp, powerful focus. You stop wasting energy on things that were never yours to control in the first place. This simple but profound insight is the first step toward unbreakable discipline. To practice discipline is not just to exert willpower, it's to wisely allocate that willpower. Every time you complain about traffic, or a missed opportunity, or something someone said to you, you burn mental fuel on something that cannot be changed. But when you focus that same mental energy on improving your form at the gym, refining your pitch at work, or managing your thoughts when anxiety creeps in, you begin to see the power of controlling the controllable. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who faced immense pressure from war, plague, and betrayal, put it plainly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. In modern life, this principle applies everywhere. Take the gym, for instance. You can't control how quickly your body changes or how much muscle you gain in 2 weeks. But you can control whether you show up, whether you execute each rep with precision, and whether you recover well. That's what counts. Over time, the results follow, not because you obsessed over them, but because you relentlessly focused on the process. In business, you can't control the market. You can't control whether your client picks your proposal, but you can control the quality of your work, your consistency, and your adaptability. Those who master this distinction play the long game, and that's what unbreakable discipline is. It's a long game. Mental health is another area where this lesson is vital. You may not be able to control that wave of sadness or stress that shows up without warning, but you can control how you respond to it. Do you let it define your day, or do you greet it like an old visitor and choose how much power it gets over you? Viktor Frankl, though not a Stoic, aligned with their principles when he said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." That's Stoicism in action. That's discipline. It's choosing to respond rather than react, to ground yourself in clarity rather than emotion. Think about your daily habits. Each time you hit snooze, skip a workout, or put off something difficult, you're reacting, letting comfort or fear decide for you. But each time you move forward, despite resistance, you're choosing to act with intent. This is how discipline is built. Moment by moment, choice by choice. It's not about feeling like doing it. It's about knowing it's within your control and doing it anyway. This mindset is the antidote to modern anxiety, procrastination, and burnout. It's not about being perfect, but about being consistent in directing your energy toward what matters. Let's return to Epictetus. His Enchiridion, a handbook for living, begins with this core idea of control because it is the root of all other teachings. Without understanding it, we chase illusions. With it we become grounded, resilient, and powerful. When a person truly embraces this Stoic truth, they stop flinching at failure, rejection, or pain. They stop letting the world dictate their mood. Instead, they begin to own their energy, their actions, their direction, and once you do that, you've already separated yourself from the masses. Imagine your life as a ship at sea. The waves, the chaos, the uncontrollable will always be there. You cannot stop the storm, but you can adjust your sails, and more importantly, you can choose the direction you steer. That's your power, that's your domain. When the storm hits, the undisciplined curse the sky. The disciplined take the wheel. Discipline at its core is not about intensity, it's about sovereignty. It's about not giving your power away to what lies beyond your reach. So as we begin this journey of building unbreakable discipline, let this lesson be etched into your mind. Start with what you can control, not just as an idea, but as a daily practice. Reclaim your focus from the noise. Stop obsessing over results and pour yourself into your efforts. Don't be reactive to circumstance, be responsive to your purpose. Whether in fitness, business, or mental health, the world will test you with distraction, chaos, and things beyond your control. Let them come, because now you know where your power lies. Lesson 2. The discipline of showing up, consistency over intensity. If the foundation of discipline lies in knowing what we can control, the next pillar is the unwavering act of showing up day after day, regardless of mood, motivation, or immediate outcome. Many people imagine discipline as a burning fire, something intense, powerful, and overwhelming. But in truth, real discipline is far less glamorous. It's quiet, steady, and often invisible to the outside world. It's not the heroic burst of energy that gets you to the gym once a month. It's the decision to go 5 days a week when no one's watching. It's not the inspiration that pushes you to work on your business for 10 hours straight once in a while. It's the 2 hours you invest every day, even when you feel like nothing is happening. Discipline, above all, is the art of showing up. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in Meditations, reminded himself daily to meet life head-on. At dawn, he wrote, "When you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being.'" This wasn't just a motivational mantra, it was a challenge, a reminder that the day doesn't ask if you're in the mood. The duty of being a rational, purposeful person does not wait for convenience, and neither does progress. Whether your path is physical, professional, or mental, what matters most is not how intense your effort is today, it's that you show up tomorrow. In our culture, intensity is idolized. The all-nighter, the crash diet, the dramatic lifestyle change. But these are fireworks, bright, loud, and short-lived. Consistency, by contrast, is like water carving a canyon, slow, subtle, but powerful beyond measure. Seneca wrote that consistency is the foundation of virtue, He understood that strength of character comes not from rare moments of courage, but from the daily practice of showing up with integrity. In business, success doesn't come from one big client or a viral moment. It comes from years of deliberate work, trial and error, and the willingness to face the grind. In fitness, the best bodies are not sculpted by perfect workouts, but by the imperfect ones, the ones done tired, rushed, or distracted, but done nonetheless. Modern research into habit formation backs this up. Psychologists like James Clear have popularized the concept of compound growth, that small actions, repeated consistently, lead to extraordinary results over time. But the Stoics knew this thousands of years ago. Epictetus urged his students to act like athletes in training, not just when the crowd is watching, but especially when it's not. If you want to improve, he said, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because consistency often looks unremarkable. It's not exciting to eat the same meal prep, write the same pages, or repeat the same exercises. But behind that repetition is the slow, inevitable sharpening of the self. In mental health, this principle is just as vital. Healing and growth are not linear. Some days you feel better. Others, you feel like you've taken 10 steps back. But showing up for yourself, whether through journaling, therapy, walking, meditating, or simply surviving the day without giving in, that's what builds inner strength. The consistent act of facing life, even when life is unbearable, becomes its own quiet kind of triumph. Stoicism teaches us that we don't need to be extraordinary every day. We only need to do what is required, as best we can, and trust that our efforts will compound in the long run. The gym is a perfect mirror for this truth. There will be days when your energy is low, your motivation is gone, and your progress feels invisible. But the bar doesn't care. The mat doesn't ask if you feel like training. The only question is whether you'll show up. When you do, you honor something deeper than goals. You honor a commitment to yourself. That's what builds real discipline. Not inspiration, not emotion, just the choice to act in alignment with your purpose, regardless of how you feel. It's tempting to wait for the perfect day, the day when you're fully rested, excited, and clear-headed. But those days are rare. If you only show up when conditions are ideal, you'll show up rarely. The Stoics believed that virtue is forged in adversity, not in ease. That means the days when you feel like quitting are not setbacks, they're the training ground. Every time you resist the urge to skip the work, every time you choose purpose over comfort, you strengthen the muscle of discipline. You're not just building habits, you're building identity. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling the Roman Empire, wrote every morning, not because he had time, but because he made it. His discipline wasn't born from privilege, it was built through daily practice. In our own lives, we must adopt the same standard. Whether you're building a business, healing your mind, or transforming your body, ask yourself, can I show up today? That's it. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't compare yourself to others. Just win the moment in front of you. Eventually, consistency builds momentum. Momentum builds belief. Belief builds results. And results build motivation, not the other way around. Most people wait for motivation to start. But the disciplined understand, action precedes motivation. When you act, even in a small way, you start to shift your mental state. A 10-minute walk, leads to a clearer mind. A single sales call leads to a second. One set in the gym leads to another. This chain reaction is the quiet engine of progress, and it all starts with showing up. So, if you want to build unbreakable discipline, stop chasing intensity. Chase consistency. Don't aim to be extraordinary. Aim to be consistent, because consistency over time becomes extraordinary. Remember, the path to greatness is not marked by bursts of brilliance. It's paved by countless ordinary days, filled with ordinary actions, done with extraordinary commitment. Lesson 3. Embracing adversity as the furnace of discipline. The greatest strength we can ever cultivate is not found in ease or luxury. It is forged in adversity. This is where the Stoics truly separated themselves from the rest. They didn't just accept difficulty, they welcomed it as the very substance through which character and discipline are born. For them, adversity was not a curse but a teacher. In the words of Seneca, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. The Stoics believed that if you shield yourself from hardship, you also shield yourself from growth. To build unbreakable discipline, one must learn to stand firm in the face of discomfort, chaos, and setbacks, not just with patience, but with gratitude. To the modern ear, this sounds counterintuitive. Why would anyone be grateful for pain, loss, or failure? Because it is precisely these experiences that reveal who we truly are. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and one of the greatest Stoic minds, wrote often in his private journals about the daily grind of leading an empire. He faced betrayal, war, and plague, yet his words remain calm, focused, and composed. He didn't allow chaos to infect his inner world. His strength was internal, not circumstantial. And this is the foundation of unbreakable discipline, the ability to maintain clarity, purpose, and self-control when the world is anything but calm. Let's bring this down to something tangible. Take the gym, for instance. Every drop of sweat, every burning rep, every set that tempts you to quit is an opportunity. That pain in your muscles, that's not suffering, that's transformation. Every time you push through when your body says stop, you're building something far more powerful than muscle. You're building resilience. You're teaching your mind that it's capable of enduring discomfort for a greater purpose. And that's the language of the Stoics. They trained themselves to endure the mental and emotional equivalents of a hard workout. Whether you're facing rejection in your business, burnout in your daily routine, or a mental health low that seems to sap your drive, each moment of struggle is also a proving ground. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and endured brutal conditions, taught that no one can truly harm you unless you allow them to disturb your internal state. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. For Epictetus, discipline wasn't a tool for success, it was survival. It was the only way to remain free, even when bound in chains. You can take this mindset into any area of life. In business, failure is inevitable. Plans fall apart. People back out. Your ideas get ignored. But discipline says keep moving. Don't react emotionally. Learn, adjust, strike again. In mental health, this lesson may be the hardest, yet most transformative. When you're facing anxiety or depression, the pain isn't just physical, it's spiritual. The world narrows, energy fades, hope feels distant, but it is in these moments, when you choose to keep showing up, to keep taking small steps, to stick to your routines, that you are practicing Stoicism at the highest level. You're resisting the impulse to collapse into despair. You're proving that discipline is not a performance, it's a way of being. Adversity, then, is not the enemy of discipline. It is its womb. Without hardship, there can be no endurance. Without pain, there can be no strength. The Stoics knew this intimately, and they prepared themselves for suffering by facing it willingly. Seneca used to practice poverty, even though he was rich. He wore simple clothes, ate coarse food, and slept on the floor, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remind himself that he could endure anything. In doing so, he turned adversity into an ally. This approach changes the entire framework of your life. Instead of dreading challenges, you begin to see them as your training grounds. Every rejection letter, every slow progress day in the gym, every morning you wake up feeling foggy or low, these are your crucibles. These are the spaces where unbreakable discipline is built, not when it's easy, not when it's smooth, but when everything inside you wants to quit, and you don't. When you stand tall and keep going, even 1 inch at a time. So embrace adversity, not reluctantly, but with open arms. Know that within every trial lies the potential for greatness. Remind yourself that you are not here to live an easy life. You are here to become strong, wise, and unshakable. And that can only happen through fire. The Stoics understood this truth, and if you walk their path, so will you. This is not about chasing pain, it's about welcoming growth. And all true growth comes with struggle. That struggle is not the enemy, it is your teacher. And if you can learn to love your teacher, there will be nothing in this world that can break you. Lesson 4. Voluntary discomfort. Training the mind through self-imposed trials. At the core of Stoic philosophy lies an understanding that comfort, if not carefully managed, becomes a slow poison. The ancients knew what we often forget in modern life, that indulging too much in ease weakens the will. Comfort dulls the edge of our discipline, slowly at first, then all at once. That's why the Stoics practiced what they called voluntary discomfort, deliberate exposure to hardship in times of peace, so that when real suffering came, they would not be unprepared. To build unbreakable discipline, you must embrace this ancient art of choosing discomfort, not randomly, but with intention, as training for the battles of life. Seneca wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" This wasn't some show of masochism, it was training. By voluntarily exposing himself to the very things people fear, poverty, hunger, isolation, Seneca diffused their power. He wasn't caught off guard by misfortune because he had already lived it in his own controlled experiments. This is one of the most underrated but powerful forms of mental conditioning you can practice today. In modern life, this principle still applies. Voluntary discomfort in our time might mean fasting once a week, not for aesthetics, but to train your appetite. It might mean cold showers, not for viral challenges, but for control over impulse. It could be giving up social media for a stretch, not because it's evil, but because your mind should never be addicted to noise. When you deny yourself something that's easy, that's pleasurable, or that you deserve, you begin to see how rarely you actually need it. That gap between want and need is where discipline is sharpened. Look at the gym. Choosing to work out when your body is sore or going on a run in the cold morning air is voluntary discomfort. You're telling yourself, I don't need to feel good to act. I don't need perfect conditions to move forward. Each rep, each mile, each drop of sweat trains you to endure, and that endurance stacks. Over time, your mind stops searching for an excuse to quit. It adapts. It gets tougher. It starts craving challenge. You build a body that's strong, but more importantly, a mind that refuses to bend. Epictetus, who had every reason to complain, being born a slave, living in constant physical pain, taught that discipline begins when we choose to do the hard thing, not because we're forced to, but because it strengthens the soul. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid, he said. That's voluntary discomfort, too, the emotional kind. Speaking your truth even when it makes people uncomfortable, standing by your values even when it costs you popularity, saying no when the world says yes. This is a different kind of training, but it's just as vital. Stoic discipline is forged in both body and spirit. In the business world, voluntary discomfort can look like taking risks that stretch you, making cold calls, pitching that project you're afraid to present, waking up at 5 a.m. to work when no one else is watching. Discipline in business isn't just about hustle, it's about stepping into uncertainty willingly. Great entrepreneurs and creators all share this, the willingness to do what's uncomfortable long before it's expected of them. In mental health, this might mean leaning into difficult conversations, confronting the emotions you normally avoid, or sitting in silence with your own thoughts when the instinct is to distract. Journaling honestly when you don't like what you'll find. Turning down the noise. Facing the discomfort of being fully present. This is inner strength. And it's how you prepare for the moments when life stops asking and starts demanding. Voluntary discomfort is not about making life harder than it needs to be. It's about preparing yourself for when life gets hard on its own. It's about developing the kind of psychological immunity that allows you to remain calm, focused, and in control no matter what the world throws at you. And the only way to build this immunity is through practice. So take cold showers. Fast, wake up early, say no to indulgence, ask hard questions. Train your discipline like a muscle. Every time you do something uncomfortable on purpose, you are strengthening your capacity to endure. You're building a life not based on comfort, but on character. And in a world full of people seeking the path of least resistance, you'll stand out, not because you're flashy or loud, but because you are unshakable. Lesson 5. Mastering Negative Visualization. Building Strength Through Imagined Loss. One of the most powerful and paradoxical techniques found in Stoic philosophy is the practice of premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. At first glance, the idea of intentionally visualizing worst-case scenarios might seem pessimistic or even counterproductive. But to the Stoics, this practice wasn't about dwelling in fear, it was about building strength, clarity, and peace of mind. They understood a truth that modern psychologists and mental performance coaches are only now beginning to echo. When we face adversity in our minds before it comes, we prepare ourselves to meet it with grace in reality. Seneca, in particular, championed this practice. He once wrote, "He robs presentials of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." In other words, by imagining loss, failure, or hardship ahead of time, we reduce their sting. When we visualize being without what we hold dear, be it comfort, wealth, people, or even life itself, we slowly detach from the fear of losing them. This doesn't mean we love them any less. In fact, it allows us to love more purely, with presence rather than anxiety. Let's ground this in modern life. Consider the world of business. An entrepreneur who never considers the possibility of failure is one who builds fragile systems, but one who takes the time to imagine a financial downturn, a failed product launch, or an unexpected competitor can then build safeguards and develop contingency plans. They are more emotionally prepared and less likely to panic under pressure. Similarly, a person committed to fitness who only imagines progress and consistency is unprepared for injuries, plateaus, or mental burnout. But one who visualizes a future where they are injured or lose access to the gym temporarily builds mental resiliency and perhaps even adapts by creating a home workout plan or focusing on recovery and nutrition. This kind of mental training doesn't create weakness, it builds flexibility. It prepares us to respond instead of react, to endure rather than collapse. Negative visualization also has a surprising emotional benefit. It enhances gratitude. When you imagine losing something, a job, a friend, your physical health, you tend to appreciate it more. It cuts through complacency. Marcus Aurelius practiced this almost ritualistically. In meditations, he would remind himself not only of death, but also of the impermanence of every pleasure, every relationship, every joy. It wasn't a call to despair, but a call to presence. You hold your morning coffee differently when you imagine it's the last you'll ever drink. You speak with a loved one more attentively when you realize this moment may never come again. In this way, premeditatio malorum becomes not just a resilience practice, but a gratitude practice. And it flies in the face of modern toxic positivity, which tells us to never think of failure, never consider the worst. But burying our fears doesn't remove them. It only makes us more vulnerable when they surface. In mental health, this technique has found echoes in modern cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT), which emphasizes exposure and preparation. Many anxiety treatment plans include forms of controlled exposure where the person imagines or gradually confronts the things they fear. This isn't about suffering needlessly, it's about strengthening our response. Similarly, in the Stoic tradition, when you imagine the loss of your reputation, your wealth, or even your life, you learn to stop gripping so tightly. You become harder to offend, harder to derail, harder to break. Seneca again tells us, misfortune weighs most heavily on those who expect nothing but good fortune. The more we expect ease, the more we are shattered by struggle, but when we rehearse misfortune in the mind, we armor ourselves. We become unbreakable, not through denial, but through confrontation. Let's not confuse this with the law of attraction or magical thinking. Stoicism doesn't teach us to manifest suffering into existence by thinking about it. Rather, it teaches us that by confronting fear voluntarily, we neutralize its power. Think of it like an athlete preparing for game day. They run simulations of every possible outcome: bad calls, hostile crowds, injuries. They don't want these things to happen, but they rehearse their responses. That way, when pressure hits, they remain calm. They've already seen it, they've trained for it. They don't crumble because they've faced it already in the mind. The same applies to us in our lives. When you imagine being insulted, criticized, or rejected, you can meet those moments without surprise or anger. When you visualize losing a promotion or seeing your business fail, you can still act with honor and dignity because your sense of self wasn't tied to external success. This is how we build what the Stoics called inner citadels, mental fortresses that the chaos of the world cannot penetrate. To truly practice negative visualization, it must become a habit. Not something we do once and forget, but something we return to regularly. Take time each morning or evening to ask yourself, what do I fear losing the most? What would I do if I lost it today? Could I still live with integrity, courage, and calm? You may begin with small things, the car you love, your phone, your routine, and work your way up to larger ones, like your health, your loved ones, even your own life. The Stoics knew that we are far more resilient than we believe, but only if we train. Only if we harden our minds the same way a blacksmith tempers steel, with fire and friction. And the fire of imagination can prepare us like no external comfort ever could. The goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to become emotionally mature, to feel deeply yet remain centered, to love fully without being enslaved by fear. This is the gift of premeditatio malorum. It teaches us not to fear loss, but to live with greater presence and power. In this way, negative visualization is not a negative practice. It is a profoundly life-affirming one. It reconnects us to what matters most by reminding us it could be taken away at any moment. And when you live like that, aware, prepared, and grateful, you don't just build discipline. You build unshakable character. You become someone who doesn't just survive life's storms. You become the calm in the center of them. Lesson 6. The art of voluntary discomfort. Tempering the soul through hardship. Among the Stoic practices that run counter to modern sensibilities, few are as misunderstood yet as vital as the concept of voluntary discomfort. To many, the very idea seems backward. Why seek out pain, difficulty, or lack when comfort, luxury, and convenience are so readily available? But the Stoics believed that if you wish to build true discipline, if you desire strength that doesn't crumble under pressure, then comfort must not become your master. In their eyes, comfort is seductive but softening, like a warm bath that weakens resolve over time. True resilience, they believed, is forged in hardship, especially the kind we willingly choose. Musonius Rufus, one of the less widely known but deeply influential Stoics, taught that luxury weakens the soul, while voluntary hardship sharpens it. He urged his students to eat plain food, walk long distances, and wear simple clothes, not because he despised comfort, but because he feared what overindulgence does to character. Seneca practiced this too. In his letters, he advised taking days each month to eat the roughest food, wear coarse clothing, and sleep without the usual comforts. The purpose, he explained, was to ask yourself in those moments, is this what I feared? In other words, by voluntarily experiencing what we dread, we reduce its power. When you've already lived simply, the threat of poverty no longer frightens you. When you've gone without for a while, you learn not only that you can survive, but that your mind, unburdened by excess, becomes clearer and stronger. Voluntary discomfort builds courage, not because it's masochistic, but because it removes fear. It separates needs from wants, illusions from reality. Let's bring this into a modern context. Think of the gym. Physical training is a modern form of voluntary discomfort. When you put your body under stress, lifting weight, sprinting, holding a plank, you are willingly embracing discomfort to grow stronger. If you stopped every time it got hard, you'd never progress. And yet, by leaning into the pain, by accepting it as part of the process, you build muscle, endurance, and resilience. The same is true for your mind. When you voluntarily restrict certain pleasures, fasting, abstaining from social media, cold showers, waking up early, you're doing the same thing with your soul that the athlete does with the body. You're telling yourself, I am not a slave to comfort, I can do without. I choose hardship because I seek mastery. Business leaders and entrepreneurs also understand this principle. Starting a company is a form of voluntary discomfort. It often means sacrificing short-term gains, risking failure, and working long hours without recognition. But those who succeed are usually those who learn to embrace this pain, to take it not as suffering but as sculpting. They know that comfort is the enemy of progress, and that every hardship endured now sharpens their edge for later. Steve Jobs once said that the journey is the reward. That's a Stoic sentiment. It's not about avoiding pain, it's about finding purpose through it. In the realm of mental health, voluntary discomfort is equally powerful. Modern psychology teaches us about exposure therapy, gradually and intentionally facing the things we fear or avoid. It's uncomfortable by design, but it's what helps individuals reclaim their lives from phobias, trauma, and anxiety. The Stoics were ahead of their time here. They understood that mental fortitude grows not in avoidance but in confrontation. You cannot be courageous if you've never faced fear. You cannot be patient if you've never been forced to wait. Every virtue must be tested to be strengthened, and the test is discomfort. Chosen, not imposed. There is also a social dimension to voluntary discomfort. In a world obsessed with image, social validation, and status, choosing to be seen as less than can be one of the most difficult forms of hardship. But the Stoics would ask, what is it you truly fear? To be misunderstood, to be laughed at, to be thought poor or strange. Voluntarily letting go of status by speaking plainly, dressing modestly, or refraining from bragging trains you to be inwardly free. It's not that appearance doesn't matter, it's that it shouldn't own you. True freedom is the ability to walk away from the applause and remain whole. This practice also changes your relationship with adversity. When you're used to voluntarily going without, when you're used to choosing the harder path, life's unexpected storms don't shake you the same way. You've rehearsed discomfort, you've walked barefoot, so that when your shoes wear out, you don't break. Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, understood this deeply. Despite his immense power and wealth, he constantly reminded himself of the simplicity of life and death. He prepared for sickness, betrayal, and hardship, not as a pessimist but as a man training his soul to stand firm. He knew that a life built on ease was a life built on sand. Voluntary discomfort doesn't require extremes. You don't need to sleep on rocks or starve yourself to develop inner strength. It's about small repeated challenges that remind you who's in charge, you or your appetites. Skip a meal and observe your reactions. Turn off your phone for a day and see what surfaces. Walk in the rain without complaint. Train in the cold. Say no to a luxury you can afford. Each of these is a tiny rebellion against the part of you that demands comfort and avoids pain. And each time you win that battle, you grow. There is dignity in this practice. When you meet someone who has trained themselves to endure, to persist, to choose difficulty over decadence, you can feel it. They have a quiet power. They don't brag, they don't complain, they simply act. And when the world throws them into chaos, they do not flinch, because they've already faced themselves. They've already stripped away the layers of comfort to find something unshakable underneath. And that is what the Stoics aimed for. Not a life free from hardship, but a life prepared for it. So ask yourself this: where in your life have you become too soft, too dependent, too comfortable? And what could you do today, intentionally, mindfully, to challenge that softness? The answer doesn't need to be dramatic. It needs only to be consistent. Discipline, after all, is not a single act. It's a repeated choice to do what is difficult over what is easy, what is right over what is pleasant, and voluntary discomfort is its training ground. When we step willingly into hardship, we cease to fear it, and when we cease to fear hardship, we become free. Not just free to live, but free to live well. Lesson 7. Premeditatio malorum. Preparing the mind for adversity. One of the most powerful and practical tools in the Stoic discipline is a mental exercise known as premeditatio malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. At first glance, this practice might seem dark, even pessimistic. Why, one might ask, should we spend time imagining bad things happening to us? Isn't that inviting negativity? But the Stoics, ever practical and deeply rooted in reality, saw it differently. For them, visualizing adversity wasn't about paranoia or self-sabotage. It was about preparation, about gaining clarity, and about removing the element of surprise from life's inevitable difficulties. To them, forethought was armor, and premeditatio malorum was one of their sharpest tools for mental fortitude. This practice was embraced by nearly every major Stoic thinker. Seneca often wrote about rehearsing worst-case scenarios so that when they came, they would not crush him. He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand, he wrote. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in the world as Emperor of Rome, would begin his days by reminding himself of what kinds of people he might encounter: liars, selfish men, rude citizens, and flatterers. Why? Because forewarning is forearming. If you walk into life expecting perfection, you will be shattered by its chaos. But if you have rehearsed your response to life's cruelty, injustice, and indifference, you meet those moments with grace, not panic. Consider how useful this can be in the modern world. A businessman, before launching a new venture, can spend time imagining delays, financial losses, betrayal by partners, or sudden market crashes. Not to wallow in fear, but to prepare himself emotionally. This mental rehearsal doesn't make disaster more likely, it makes success more sustainable. Because when setbacks occur, he doesn't collapse. He already saw them. He planned for them. He met them in the mind before he met them in the world. This mental preparation gives him a psychological advantage over competitors who assume only smooth sailing. He is trained for the storm. Athletes, too, engage in this practice without realizing its ancient roots. Before a big fight or race, elite competitors often visualize the worst scenarios: fatigue hitting early, injury, unfair refereeing, or even losing. Why? Because if the worst does come, they've been there mentally. They are not stunned, they respond instead of react. This is the Stoic mindset in action. You strengthen yourself not just through effort, but through imagination, by visualizing adversity and choosing your response in advance. In mental health, this technique has a deeply empowering effect. People struggling with anxiety are often afraid of what-ifs. What if I lose my job? What if my partner leaves? What if I get sick? Stoicism doesn't tell them to ignore these fears. Instead, it invites them to explore them deliberately and rationally. What if that happens? What would you do? Could you survive? Would you adapt? Would there be growth in that suffering? Most of the time, the mind realizes that what we fear is survivable. By facing our fears in our mind, we shrink them. Fear thrives in the unknown. Once it is known, it loses its edge. Premeditatio malorum turns the unknown into something familiar, something manageable. There is also a deeper lesson in humility here. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself daily that he could lose everything: his health, his empire, his family, not because he was morbid, but because he wanted to love those things fully while they were still his. Memento mori, the reminder of death, and premeditatio malorum go hand in hand. Together, they foster appreciation. When you consider the possibility that this might be the last time you speak to someone, you listen differently. When you reflect on the fact that you might one day be too old to train or too ill to pursue your goals, you treat each opportunity with reverence. You stop wasting time. You stop taking people for granted. You begin to live with urgency and presence. Let us now consider how this applies to discipline. If you're trying to develop unbreakable discipline, you cannot rely on motivation alone. You must prepare for what might derail you. If your goal is to train every morning, imagine the worst nights. You didn't sleep well, it's cold outside, you feel sore, your alarm failed. Now ask yourself, what will you do? Will you skip the day and fall back into weakness, or will you train anyway because you expected this? If your goal is to build a business, imagine the rejections, the loneliness, the late nights, and the anxiety. Ask yourself, are you willing to endure this? If not, why are you starting at all? Premeditatio malorum is not about being gloomy, it's about being realistic. It is the training of a mind that does not wish to be caught off guard. It is a blueprint for courage, not through blind optimism, but through brutal honesty. The Stoics didn't aim to control fate, they aimed to control themselves within fate. And that meant preparing the soul for impact over and over again until nothing could surprise it. Think of a firefighter who trains in mock drills where everything goes wrong: blocked exits, failing hoses, screaming civilians. Why do they do this? Because when the real fire comes, they don't freeze. They move, they act, they stay calm. Life is no different. it will bring the flames. Your job is to rehearse your strength, to visualize the chaos, and then see yourself enduring it, surviving it, and continuing on. The beauty of this practice is that it removes the sting of illusion. You stop expecting life to be easy, and so difficulty becomes natural. You stop assuming people will always treat you fairly, and so betrayal doesn't destroy your trust in humanity. You stop thinking success will come without failure, and so each fall is seen not as a curse, but as a stepping stone. In this way, premeditatio malorum is not only preparation, it is liberation, so make it a practice. Before a big event, sit quietly and ask what might go wrong. What will I do if it does? Will I be ready? Before each day, ask what kinds of problems might I face today: frustration, disrespect, loss, inconvenience. Will I meet them like a Stoic or a slave to circumstance? When you train this way, you are no longer surprised by life. You are armed with foresight and steadied by practice. In the end, premeditatio malorum teaches us this: we do not control the world, but we do control our readiness. We cannot prevent adversity, but we can decide in advance not to be broken by it. And that is the essence of Stoic discipline: not perfection, not control, but unshakable preparation. To be the one who expects the storm and walks into it standing tall, because he rehearsed this moment in his mind long before it arrived. Lesson 8. The dichotomy of control. Mastering what truly belongs to you. At the core of Stoic philosophy lies one of its most empowering and clarifying ideas: the dichotomy of control. First introduced with depth and clarity by Epictetus, a former slave turned great Stoic teacher, this principle teaches us to separate the world into two distinct categories: what is within our control and what is not. That distinction is not merely theoretical. It is the dividing line between personal peace and perpetual torment. Understanding and applying this lesson is one of the most powerful shifts any person can make in their journey toward unbreakable discipline. Epictetus stated it simply: some things are in our control and others not. What falls into our control? Our thoughts, our beliefs, our intentions, our choices, our efforts. These are internal. These are ours. What lies outside of our control? Other people's opinions, external events, the weather, the economy, politics, outcomes, and even our own bodies to an extent, since illness, injury, and aging are not always ours to prevent. When we confuse these two realms, when we try to control the uncontrollable or ignore what is actually ours, we create suffering. The Stoic strives to reverse that. He focuses only on what truly belongs to him: his response, his effort, his principles. Let's ground this in a modern context. Imagine you're training at the gym. You can't control how fast your body changes. You can't guarantee that you'll avoid injury or that you'll hit your PR every time. But you can control showing up, your form, your effort, your consistency, your attitude. When people fail in fitness, it's often because they obsess over things they can't control: how quickly they get abs, how heavy they can lift in a short period, how they compare to others. The Stoic doesn't ask, "How fast can I look like that guy?" He asks, "Am I honoring my effort today?" That is discipline, not chasing a result, but showing up for the process. In business, this principle is equally critical. You cannot control the market, your competitors, the economy, or whether investors say yes or no. You cannot control viral trends, or whether your ad campaign performs as expected. But you can control your strategy, your preparation, your decisions, and your perseverance. You can control how you show up when others quit. Epictetus reminds us that we are not disturbed by things, but by our judgment of things. When an entrepreneur is rejected or sees a venture fail, he often crumbles because he feels he failed. But failure, in the Stoic view, is not determined by the outcome. It's determined by whether you abandoned your principles or effort. If you stayed true, then you didn't fail at all. Mental health also benefits profoundly from understanding this dichotomy. So much of anxiety and stress comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. We worry about what others think, about the future, about how others will react to us. These are things outside of us. The Stoic approach is to return again and again to the inner citadel. Is this mine to control? If the answer is no, let it go. That doesn't mean we don't care. It means we stop wasting energy where it is powerless. And that reclaiming of energy allows us to invest it into what is truly ours, our mindset, our actions, our direction. Marcus Aurelius, as Emperor of Rome, could have easily been swept up in the illusion of control. But even he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This mindset doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Because when you relinquish the need to dominate what lies beyond you, you become ruthless in mastering what lies within you. The Stoic does not aim to bend the world. He bends himself in alignment with wisdom. Let us return to discipline. So many people fail in their habits, not because they are lazy, but because they have misunderstood what they can and cannot control. You can't control how motivated you feel tomorrow, but you can control whether you train anyway. You can't control if people applaud your consistency, but you can control whether you keep showing up. You can't control how many clients you get right away, but you can control whether you improve your product, stay focused, and keep learning. When you live with that clarity, discipline becomes easier, not because life is easier, but because your focus is purer. This lesson also strips away excuses. Many people blame their failure on what they cannot change: their upbringing, their environment, their luck, their genetics. But Stoicism doesn't let you live as a victim. It asks, what can you do? What is within your hands? Then do that. No one is asking for perfection. But the disciplined person takes full ownership of their effort. The rest is surrendered, not with resentment, but with peace. This surrender is not defeat, it's wisdom. When you accept what's beyond you, you stop fighting shadows and start building reality. There's a quiet confidence that emerges when you truly live by the dichotomy of control. You no longer react to every inconvenience or injustice. You don't spiral when plans fall apart. You don't crumble when others betray you, or when the world resists your efforts. Why? Because you know this is not mine. What is mine? My will, my choices, my virtue, and I guard that like a soldier at the gate. This mindset doesn't just build peace, it builds power. because very few people in this world can remain calm when things fall apart. The Stoic can, and that calmness gives him a decisive advantage in every arena of life. Let this become your filter. Each time life throws something at you, ask, is this within my control? If yes, act. If no, accept. Simple, not easy, but simple. This clarity is what builds unbreakable discipline, because your energy is never wasted, your focus is never scattered, and your mind is not enslaved by outcomes you cannot dictate. The dichotomy of control is the Stoic's compass. It guides his emotions, sharpens his discipline, and anchors his peace. In a world that spins with chaos, the Stoic plants his flag in the only territory he truly owns, his mind. And from that stronghold, he builds a life that cannot be broken. Lesson 9. Amor fati, loving one's fate. Amor fati. The Latin phrase means love of fate, but this is not a passive acceptance. It is not resignation. It is one of the most powerful and demanding calls to discipline that Stoicism offers. Amor fati asks not just that we endure what life gives us, not merely that we accept it, but that we love it. Everything. The good, the bad, the unfair, the tragic. To not just say, this is okay, but to say, this is what I needed. To see everything as fuel for your fire. Friedrich Nietzsche popularized the phrase in modern times, but the spirit of amor fati runs through the writings of every Stoic. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminds himself that a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. This is the essence of amor fati. To turn obstacles into fuel, to take misfortune and make meaning. It is to see the structure of your life not as fragmented chaos, but as a coherent whole, each piece, no matter how painful, essential to the design. Most people spend their lives resisting life. They fight against what has already happened. They complain, blame, and fall into despair. But Stoicism teaches us to meet life differently. Discipline begins not when we conquer the world, but when we stop resisting it. You cannot always control what happens, but you can choose your posture toward it. And amor fati is the most powerful posture of all. It is the posture of the unshakable. Consider how this plays out in the gym. Injuries happen. Progress stalls. Workouts are disrupted. A person without amor fati sees these as setbacks, even as signs to quit. But the Stoic athlete sees something else. A shoulder injury becomes an opportunity to train legs. A plateau becomes a call to refine technique. A cancelled workout becomes a day for recovery or mobility. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is resented. Everything is used. That's amor fati in practice. In business, we often encounter unexpected challenges, market crashes, failed launches, partnerships that fall apart. Most people lament these events, dwell on the lost opportunities, or give up entirely. The Stoic entrepreneur, however, practices amor fati. They mine each failure for insight. They view each collapse not as a coffin, but as a chrysalis. Something is being reshaped, even if it isn't obvious yet. They do not ask, why me? They ask, what now? And they move forward, not bitterly, but boldly. Amor fati transforms your mental health too. When you face anxiety, depression, loss, or fear. Amor fati is not a denial of suffering. It is the resolve to walk through it with dignity. It is the refusal to label suffering as meaningless. Amor fati says, "This is mine. I do not wish it away. I do not trade it for ease. I carry it, and I will make something from it." This mindset allows you to hold your pain with strength. You don't have to pretend it's pleasant, but you no longer see it as a mistake. You see it as a chapter in your becoming. We must also realize that amor fati is not a one-time declaration. It is a daily, even hourly discipline. To love your fate when life is smooth is easy. To love your fate when it breaks your heart, when it brings pain or betrayal or death, that is where true discipline is born. Epictetus reminded his students, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well." This is not a weak surrender. It is a courageous reframe. This philosophy doesn't mean we don't act to improve our lives. On the contrary, it means we take action without resentment. We work, we plan, we strive, but when life hands us something different, we don't whine. We shift, we pivot, we accept, and we love. That love becomes a weapon against despair. It becomes the ultimate advantage. Your enemies cannot throw anything at you that you won't use. Think of a time you experienced deep disappointment. A job you didn't get. A relationship that ended. A moment you failed. Now imagine if instead of recoiling in regret, you had leaned into it. If you had said, "This too belongs to me. This is part of my story." Amor fati doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms it. It makes it part of your strength. It lets you look at your past not as a string of misfortunes, but as a necessary forging. Marcus Aurelius lost children, fought endless wars, suffered betrayal, and battled sickness. And yet he still wrote words like, "Love not just the good, but every stitch of fate." This is not romantic optimism. It's brutal clarity. It's understanding that life will bring fire, and the only real choice is whether you will be consumed or refined. Amor fati is choosing refinement. Practicing this mindset in daily life starts with one shift: seeing everything as a teacher. Every frustration, every delay, every loss, ask, "What is this teaching me?" Sometimes the answer is immediate. Sometimes it isn't clear until years later. But faith in amor fati is the belief that the answer exists, that no moment is wasted. Even your mistakes, your lowest moments, the things you wish had never happened, Stoicism dares you to say, "Even this, I will love." Over time, this mindset becomes a shield. You walk through life knowing that nothing can truly harm you, not because you are invincible, but because you are unbreakable in your acceptance. Even the worst becomes useful, and when you no longer fear fate, you become dangerous in the best way. You are no longer manipulated by fear, discouraged by difficulty, or derailed by unpredictability. Life bends, but you do not break. This is not an easy way to live, but it is a powerful one. It requires training. You must catch your complaints, redirect your bitterness, and remind yourself constantly, "This is what was meant for me." Not because everything is perfect, but because everything can be used. That is the Stoic way. That is amor fati. So let us walk forward, not with resistance, but with reverence. Let us meet life, not with clenched fists, but with open hands. Whatever comes, we will greet it as a part of our path. No wasted days, no pointless trials. Everything counts, everything belongs. Amor Fati. Lesson 10. The discipline of will. Strength in suffering. At the heart of Stoicism lies the understanding that life is unpredictable, and much of what happens is outside of our control. Illness, betrayal, misfortune, the death of a loved one. These are not mere possibilities, but inevitable elements of the human experience. The Stoics never promised to shield us from these realities. Instead, they taught that our strength does not come from avoiding suffering, but from how we respond to it. This is what they called the discipline of will, the inner fortitude to endure what must be endured, to face suffering without surrender, and to grow stronger through trials. The Roman Stoic Epictetus, born into slavery and later crippled by his master, is the embodiment of this discipline. He taught that while we cannot control external events, we can control our response to them. He said, "Sickness is a hindrance to the body, but not to your will." Say to yourself in every difficult event, "You are an impression and not at all what you appear to be." Then examine it and test it by these rules that you have. His approach wasn't about dismissing pain, but about not letting it determine who you are. He insisted that pain is real, but so is our capacity to endure it with dignity. Consider how this principle applies in the gym. Physical training is a controlled form of suffering. Pushing your body under heavy weight, running until your lungs burn, enduring soreness. None of it is easy, yet it's how strength is built. The person who learns to stay calm under the bar, who doesn't complain during conditioning, who welcomes the burn instead of fleeing from it, this person is not just training muscles but character. In that moment, you practice the discipline of will. You learn to stay composed under pressure, to separate discomfort from panic, and to will yourself forward, even when your body begs to stop. In business, the same principle holds. Rejection, failure, long hours, uncertainty. These are the barbell equivalents of the entrepreneurial world. Many quit when the pressure builds, but the Stoic entrepreneur endures, not because they are immune to disappointment, but because they accept it as part of the game. They don't crumble when a deal falls through or when plans unravel. Instead, they say, "This is my training. This is part of my process." They develop the capacity to suffer well, to hold the vision, to stay the course, and to grow more focused, not more fragile, in the face of setbacks. Mental health, too, is an arena where the discipline of will is vital. Depression, anxiety, trauma, these are real and often overwhelming forces. Stoicism doesn't deny them, nor does it shame those who struggle. Instead, it offers a framework for resilience. When your mind feels like a storm, the Stoics teach you to anchor yourself in the present moment, to breathe, to distinguish between what is inside your control and what is not. Seneca, who battled his own dark thoughts, wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." He understood that some days merely continuing is a form of strength. The discipline of will means showing up anyway, not perfectly, not always bravely, but consistently. Modern life often conditions us to believe that any form of suffering is unnatural or unjust. We are told that pain is something to be avoided at all costs. But the Stoics flipped this idea on its head. They believed that hardship was an opportunity, a forge, a test. When you lose someone you love, when you fail publicly, when illness strikes unexpectedly, this is where your philosophy is tested. Can you meet life's fire without flinching? Can you walk through darkness without forgetting your light? That is the Stoic challenge. This doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It means being okay with not being okay and still choosing to move forward. It means crying and still standing up. It means doubting and still trying. The discipline of will is not about suppressing emotion, but about mastering response. Feel deeply, yes, but don't be drowned by the wave. Learn to surf it. Learn to say, this hurts, and also I will carry it. Epictetus reminded us often that we are not our circumstances. We are what we do with them. You can be poor and noble, sick and still dignified, alone and still unbroken. He said, the greater the difficulty, the more glory in surmounting it. Skillful pilots gain their reputation from storms and tempests. The world doesn't need more people who shrink in the face of adversity. It needs more people who carry their wounds like armor, not because they don't feel them, but because they've decided not to be defined by them. To practice this discipline daily, begin with small acts of discomfort. Wake early when your body wants to sleep. Take the cold shower. Say no to the second helping. Don't run from awkward conversations. These aren't sufferings in the grand sense, but they are training for bigger storms. Training your will to be steady, disciplined and responsive rather than reactive. When you master the little things, you prepare yourself for the weightier ones. The Stoics didn't believe suffering had to break you. On the contrary, they believed suffering was what made you. A sculptor must chip away to reveal the figure. A blacksmith must heat and hammer the blade. The process is painful, but the result is strength, beauty, utility. So too with us. The fire of life does not destroy those who are prepared. It reveals who they really are. The discipline of will is the practice of holding firm when the winds rise. It is becoming someone who, when struck, doesn't shatter but solidifies. This lesson is not meant to glorify suffering. It is meant to liberate you from its tyranny. You are not at the mercy of what happens. You are not powerless in the storm. You have within you a power stronger than circumstance, a will forged in reason, resilience, and clarity, a will that refuses to be conquered, a will that says, let it come, I will not run, I will meet it, I will endure, I will become. This is the discipline of will. It is not loud or boastful. It does not seek praise. It simply holds the line, quiet, steady, certain, and in doing so it turns ordinary people into extraordinary souls. Lesson 11. Amor fati, the love of fate. The Stoic concept of amor fati, or love of fate, is one of the most profound and difficult disciplines in the entire philosophy. It asks more than just acceptance. It asks for love, for a passionate embrace of everything that happens to us, good or bad. The phrase is most famously echoed in the writings of Friedrich Nietzsche, who was deeply inspired by the Stoics. But its spirit runs all the way back to Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Zeno. To love one's fate is not to merely tolerate or endure it. It is to see all things, even suffering and misfortune, as essential ingredients in the making of one's soul. It is the radical belief that everything that happens is not only necessary, but ultimately beneficial, if only we choose to see it that way. Marcus Aurelius captured this spirit when he wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." That is the Stoic vision. Whatever life hurls at you, loss, betrayal, poverty, failure, is fuel for the fire of your character. It can consume you, or it can transform you, but only if you allow it to. To love your fate is not to passively submit to everything. It is to work with what you are given and say, "This too is mine." It is the spiritual art of turning poison into medicine. This mindset applies powerfully to everyday challenges. Consider the world of fitness. You set out on a training program, and halfway through you get injured. Most would curse their luck, fall into self-pity, and lose momentum. But the Stoic athlete sees something different. They say, "This injury gives me the opportunity to focus on other aspects of training, mobility, nutrition, mindset." They don't resist the reality. They redirect their energy within it. That is amor fati. Not wishing the setback didn't happen, but learning to see it as a necessary teacher. It is training the mind to adapt with grace, rather than collapse in frustration. In business, we see similar patterns. The economy crashes. Your launch fails. A partner betrays you. Amor fati is the mindset that refuses to see these events as interruptions to success, but rather as essential chapters in the story. The great entrepreneurs, like the great Stoics, don't just bounce back from failure. They learn to love the lessons that failure brings. They grow precisely because things went wrong. They become more efficient, more grounded, more innovative. Amor fati is a business strategy as much as it is a spiritual one. It keeps you resilient and open-minded, even when plans go sideways. In mental health, this discipline is particularly valuable. Most people try to resist negative emotions, fear, grief, anxiety, depression, as if their mere presence is a problem. But Stoicism teaches us to look deeper. What if these emotions aren't enemies, but signals? What if their presence can guide us, refine us, and ultimately free us? Loving your fate doesn't mean you love suffering for its own sake. It means you stop warring against reality and start working with it. You begin to ask, what is this teaching me? What strength can I develop through this? In that reframing, suffering becomes something purposeful, and purpose is what makes pain bearable. Seneca reminds us, a good character, when shaken, is not overthrown but becomes stronger. He believed that our response to hardship shapes our moral excellence. If we could design our lives, we would likely choose ease and comfort. But ease doesn't create depth. Comfort doesn't forge steel. Fate is wiser than we are. It puts in front of us exactly what we need, not always what we want, but always what will elevate us if we accept it. When we begin to see our fate as something tailored to our growth, even the worst days start to carry hidden meaning. Consider someone diagnosed with a chronic illness. At first it feels like a curse. Life as they knew it is altered forever. But over time, many such individuals report a change. They begin to appreciate the small things. They spend more time with loved ones. They gain clarity about what truly matters. The illness didn't break them. It woke them up. It redirected their life towards something deeper. That's amor fati in action, not just enduring what happens, but discovering beauty in the ashes of what was lost. The Stoics were not naive. They didn't pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. They faced reality with open eyes. Marcus Aurelius lost children, battled illness, ruled during plague and war, and yet he still wrote, "Accept everything that happens as coming from nature." That wasn't apathy, it was wisdom. He realized that railing against life was pointless. The river flows where it will. The wise person builds a raft, not to fight the current, but to float with it, guiding themselves with calm and clarity. The practice of amor fati begins with language. Stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "This is happening for me." That one shift transforms victimhood into power. Next, stop resisting reality. Instead of saying, "This shouldn't be happening," try saying, "This is happening, and I will meet it with strength." This attitude doesn't make life easier, but it makes you more formidable. It doesn't remove pain, but it gives pain purpose. There's a humility that comes with this practice too. Amor fati reminds us that we don't always know what's best. What you thought was a failure might be the beginning of your greatest achievement. What you lost might be what makes you. Our perspective is limited, but fate sees the whole board. When we learn to trust it, even a little, we stop panicking every time life doesn't go our way. Ultimately, amor fati is not just a philosophical concept, it's a way of living. It's how you rise every morning, look at what the day brings, good or bad, and say yes, this too. It's how you carry your scars, not with shame but with pride. It's how you love not just the triumphs of life, but the trials that made you who you are. To love your fate is to finally stop resisting and start living, fully, freely, and with fire in your heart. Lesson 12. Voluntary discomfort. Training for the unexpected. One of the most striking and practical teachings in Stoicism is the practice of voluntary discomfort, deliberately subjecting oneself to manageable hardships in order to build resilience, gratitude, and mental toughness. This idea might sound strange in a world obsessed with convenience and comfort, where technology, services, and culture are designed to minimize friction. But for the Stoics, comfort was not the goal of life. Character was. Voluntary discomfort is not about self-punishment. It's about preemptive training, preparation for the inevitable storms of life, and a reminder of what we truly need versus what we merely want. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men of his time, famously practiced sleeping on the floor, wearing coarse clothing, and eating the simplest of meals. He did this not because he had to, but because he chose to. He writes in his letters to Lucilius, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" His point was not to glorify poverty, but to train the mind and body to be unafraid of it. If you've already experienced hardship on your own terms, it holds less power over you when it comes uninvited. This idea is as powerful now as it was in ancient Rome. In the modern world, where many people are thrown into anxiety and panic at the first sign of discomfort, be it financial insecurity, loss of routine, or physical hardship, Stoicism offers a different path. It teaches us to proactively meet discomfort so that we're not broken by it later. Think of it like lifting weights for the soul. No one enters a storm hoping it hits, but those who've trained in the rain don't fear the thunder. In the gym, this idea comes to life clearly. You voluntarily place your body under stress, lifting heavy weights, pushing through discomfort, enduring fatigue. Why? Because you understand that growth doesn't happen in ease. It happens in resistance. The same is true mentally. Practicing voluntary discomfort, cold showers, fasting, digital detoxes, minimalism isn't about suffering for its own sake. It's about reminding yourself that you are stronger than you think. That comfort is a luxury, not a necessity. That you can go without and still thrive. In business, voluntary discomfort translates into preparation and calculated risk. Great entrepreneurs don't just chase luxury and rewards, they rehearse worst-case scenarios. They cut their spending, simplify operations, live lean, and make sure that if things go south, they can survive. This is Stoicism in action. Don't just hope for the best, train for the worst. When you've already adapted your life to run on discipline and simplicity, setbacks can't derail you. That's why startups that learn to thrive on minimal resources often outperform bloated companies that crumble when funding dries up. In the realm of mental health, voluntary discomfort is especially potent. Our culture often encourages indulgence as self-care, treating yourself, avoiding stress, insulating from triggers. But the Stoics saw that overindulgence weakens the mind. A sharp mind is not coddled, it is forged. When you fast, for example, you don't just improve your physical health, you challenge your mind. You observe cravings and learn that they don't control you. When you choose silence over stimulation, solitude over noise, or stillness over constant activity, you build a core of inner peace that isn't dependent on external pleasure. This doesn't mean becoming an ascetic or rejecting joy. The Stoics still valued pleasure, they simply didn't want to be ruled by it. Marcus Aurelius could enjoy a meal, but he didn't need it to be luxurious. Epictetus could find joy in conversation, but he didn't chase social validation. By practicing voluntary discomfort, they kept their joy pure, untainted by attachment or excess. They trained themselves to be content with less, so that when life took more, they were ready. Voluntary discomfort also deepens gratitude. When you've slept on the floor for a night, you appreciate your bed more. When you've gone without your phone for a day, you become more intentional with how you use it. When you've fasted for 24 hours, a simple meal tastes extraordinary. The practice reawakens the senses. It resets your expectations. In a culture numbed by abundance, that reset is powerful. It reminds us that most of what we need is actually just what we've grown used to. And there's a spiritual dimension too. When you strip away comforts and distractions, you come face to face with yourself. Who are you when you're not entertained, pampered, or distracted? What thoughts rise up? What truths emerge? This is where Stoicism reveals its depth. Voluntary discomfort is not just a physical or mental exercise, it is a philosophical one. It forces you to sit with discomfort and ask, what does this teach me? What is essential? What can I live without? And most importantly, who am I without the things I think define me? For modern application, consider implementing small, regular acts of voluntary discomfort. Wake up early without hitting snooze. Take cold showers. Go a day without caffeine. Turn off your phone for 24 hours. Sleep without a pillow. Eat a plain, healthy meal without seasoning or sauce. Each act, while small, is a declaration: I am not controlled by comfort. I am stronger than my cravings. I am training for life. And over time, these small disciplines build something extraordinary: a person who is calm in chaos, grateful in simplicity, and unshakable in the face of change. Seneca knew that life could change in an instant. Fortune was fickle. The Stoic does not deny this. He prepares for it. Voluntary discomfort is a proactive declaration of strength. It's not about being hard on yourself. It's about being ready. And when you are ready, when you've practiced discomfort, you begin to walk through life with a quiet confidence. A confidence that says, let the storms come. I've trained for this. Lesson 13. Amor fati, loving one's fate. There is a difference between accepting life and loving life. Acceptance is passive. It's when we grit our teeth and endure, telling ourselves that we'll survive this, that we'll get through it. Amor fati, love of fate, goes far beyond that. It is not simply about tolerating what happens, but embracing it fully, as if we had chosen it. This ancient concept, deeply embedded in Stoic philosophy, is one of the most challenging and transformative ideas a person can internalize. At first glance, it might even seem irrational. Why would anyone love their suffering? Why would anyone celebrate their loss? But to the Stoics, this mindset was the secret to peace, not because it changes the world, but because it changes how we meet the world. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and endured physical disability, taught that our power lies not in events themselves, but in our response to them. He once said, "Do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do, and your life will go well." Amor fati is the natural conclusion of this wisdom. It is the full alignment of your will with reality, not out of defeat, but out of harmony. It says, this too belongs. This too has value. Even this, especially this. In business, we often try to control outcomes. We build plans, mitigate risk, design systems, and hope everything goes according to script. But life rarely plays along. Markets crash, products fail, partners walk away. A Stoic doesn't ignore these realities. Instead, they see them as raw material. Marcus Aurelius called this the obstacle that becomes the way. Amor fati is the attitude that meets a failed venture, not with bitterness, but with curiosity. What did this teach me? What does it open up? Maybe that closed door saved you from something worse. Maybe it pushed you into your true path. In hindsight, our worst failures often become our greatest catalysts. The Stoic learns to trust this process, not blindly, but courageously. In the gym, amor fati shows up when you push through pain, not resenting it, but recognizing it as part of growth. You don't hate the soreness, you welcome it. It means something is changing. It's the price of progress. In a similar way, the Stoic mindset invites us to look at every difficulty in life and see it as mental resistance training. A breakup, a rejection, a financial hit. These aren't just things to get over, they're things to grow through. And amor fati means we don't just tolerate them, we lean into them. We love them because they make us who we are. This idea also has enormous weight in the context of mental health. Many people experience anxiety and depression when life veers off course, when their expectations aren't met, or when suffering seems pointless. Amor Fati offers a radically different lens. It suggests that our greatest strength can come from the deepest pain, that our clarity often arises from our chaos. It's not a platitude, it's a discipline. You might not be able to explain why something happened, but you can choose to make it meaningful. You can turn wounds into wisdom. You can say, I didn't ask for this, but I will make something sacred out of it. That's what it means to love fate. Nietzsche famously embraced this Stoic idea, declaring that one must live as though they would willingly live the same life over again, with all of its pain and beauty, over and over. That's the intensity of Amor Fati. It's not conditional love, it's unconditional. It includes the setbacks, the scars, the seasons you wanted to skip. If you can say yes to those, if you can greet them with open arms, you are free. This doesn't mean pretending everything is good. Stoicism is not delusion. You still see injustice. You still feel grief. You still experience pain. But Amor Fati teaches you to face those moments with maturity. You do not fight the tide. You learn to swim with it. You may even come to realize that the tide was carrying you somewhere you never could have reached on your own. Practically, how do we cultivate Amor Fati? First, we become more mindful of our reactions. When something happens that feels unfair or painful, pause and ask, what if this is not happening to me, but for me? What if this is a gift in disguise? You don't need to believe it immediately. You simply need to entertain the possibility. Over time, this question changes your lens. It softens your resistance and opens your heart to hidden growth. Second, we reframe hardship as training. We use it, like the Stoics. We treat each challenge as a new opportunity to practice virtue, courage in pain, patience in delay, humility in success. Every event becomes a sparring partner for your soul. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? Amor Fati is about turning every experience into a forge for your character. Third, we express gratitude for the whole of life, not just the easy parts. Start a habit of giving thanks for what went wrong. Thank the traffic jam for teaching you patience. Thank the betrayal for showing you who's real. Thank the loss for sharpening your appreciation. This is how Stoics train their mind, not to avoid suffering, but to transform it into fuel. Ultimately, Amor Fati is a spiritual embrace of existence. It's the wisdom of a warrior, not a victim. It says, I will meet life on its terms, not mine. I will show up, not because I have control, but because I have choice. I will choose to love this moment, this challenge, this chapter, because it is here, and so am I. That union is the essence of freedom. Lesson 14. The practice of premeditatio malorum, expecting misfortune. There is a profound mental exercise in Stoicism known as premeditatio malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. At first, this might sound counterproductive. Why would anyone want to dwell on bad things that could happen? Isn't that pessimistic? But to the Stoics, this was not pessimism. It was preparation. It was strength training for the soul. This practice is about imagining adversity not to suffer twice, but to suffer less, or not at all, when the storm inevitably arrives. Life, after all, is not a matter of if hardships will come, but when, and the Stoic chooses to meet those hardships with anticipation rather than surprise. Seneca described this practice vividly in his writings. He advised that each day we imagine losing what we love, that we contemplate poverty, exile, illness, even death. He did not say this to provoke anxiety, but to loosen the grip these fears hold over us. When you rehearse hardship in your mind, it loses its power to shock you. Like a soldier who trains in the harshest conditions, the Stoic becomes resilient by living through every scenario in advance. So when life unfolds in ways you didn't expect, you can say, "I knew this was possible. I was ready." Let's take a modern example. In business, unexpected setbacks are not rare, they're normal. A deal falls through. A product fails. An investor pulls out. For someone untrained in adversity, these moments can feel like the sky is falling. But for a Stoic entrepreneur practicing premeditatio malorum, these outcomes have already been considered. Contingency plans are in place. The mind is prepared. The blow lands, but it doesn't break them. Instead of freezing or panicking, they adapt. Their composure becomes a competitive advantage. In personal life too, this practice is invaluable. Consider relationships. The people we love are not promised to us forever. And yet, most of us walk around as if they are, until the moment loss arrives and shatters our illusion. Stoicism teaches us to love deeply, but not cling blindly. By contemplating the fragility of life and the impermanence of others, we deepen our gratitude and presence. It's not about loving less, it's about loving with eyes open. Every goodbye, every hug, every shared laugh becomes sacred when you realize it could be the last. And if it ever is, you will have lived without regret. For mental health, premeditatio malorum is also a powerful antidote to anxiety. Anxiety thrives in the unknown. But the Stoic flips the script, not by ignoring the unknown, but by walking into it. When you rehearse your fears deliberately, you take back control. You shift from passive worry to active preparation. You might visualize losing your job. Instead of spiraling, you ask, how would I respond? What would I do? What skills do I have? You start to build a map. The fear shrinks, not because the danger is gone, but because your readiness has grown. It's important to note that Stoics didn't recommend dwelling on worst-case scenarios 24/7. This wasn't about obsession, it was about balance. Once you've visualized what could go wrong, you don't stay there. You return to the present with clarity. You've inoculated your mind against shock. That's the point. The exercise doesn't steal joy, it protects it. Because when you've already made peace with every outcome, you are free to enjoy the moment without fear of its end. Athletes use this principle without even realizing it. In training, they simulate pressure. They visualize mistakes. Imagine the opponent gaining the upper hand. Prepare mentally for the crowd, the noise, the fatigue. This mental rehearsal sharpens performance under stress. The same applies to any area of life. The Stoic doesn't just hope for the best. They prepare for the worst, and in doing so, they often create the best possible version of themselves. To put this practice into action, begin each morning or evening with a few quiet minutes of reflection. Ask yourself, what might go wrong today? What obstacles could appear? How might others act unpredictably? How would I handle it with calm, with reason, with dignity? Picture it, feel it, and then let it go. You're not trying to manifest disaster, you're rehearsing your response. You are training your soul to bend, not break. The benefit is not just personal resilience, it's also moral strength. Because when you expect difficulty, you become more forgiving. You stop expecting perfection from others. You stop being caught off guard by human flaws. This makes you more patient, more tolerant, more understanding. You stop overreacting. You start leading. That's the quiet power of premeditatio malorum. It doesn't just prepare you for disaster, it elevates your character in the face of it. In essence, this practice teaches us to live with fewer illusions. It's not about paranoia, it's about courage. You don't fear loss because you've faced it in your mind. You don't collapse under stress because you've rehearsed your stance. You don't cling to comfort because you've already felt the cold. In this way, Stoicism doesn't harden the heart, it sharpens it. Premeditatio malorum is a daily reminder that you are stronger than you think, and that you can meet whatever comes with grace, calm, and clarity. Lesson 15. Amor fati, the love of one's fate. One of the most powerful and liberating ideas in all of Stoic philosophy is the concept of amor fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. Unlike mere acceptance or tolerance, amor fati goes further. It asks us not only to accept what happens in life, but to love it, to embrace each twist of fortune, good or bad, as something necessary, something uniquely meant for us, something worthy of our gratitude. This idea might sound extreme, even impossible, especially in the face of loss, hardship, or pain. But to the Stoic, amor fati is the ultimate expression of inner strength and spiritual freedom. It is not resignation, it is empowerment. The phrase is often associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, but the roots of this idea trace back to Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca. Marcus Aurelius in particular offered one of the clearest expressions of this mindset. In his Meditations he wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." That's amor fati in essence. Life throws obstacles, misfortunes, betrayals, even death into our path, and we do not merely survive them, we transform them into fuel. Everything becomes part of our fire. We don't curse the wood, we burn it bright. To love your fate means to stop fighting with life. Most suffering doesn't come from events themselves, it comes from our resistance to them. We label things as unfair, unnecessary, or wrong. We dwell in the past, ruminate on what should have been, and rail against what is. But the Stoic reminds us, you don't control what happens, you only control how you respond. You can resist and break, or you can accept and rise. When we practice amor fati, we no longer see adversity as a mistake, we see it as part of the design. Not a detour, but the path. Think about this idea in the context of modern life. Imagine someone gets laid off from their job. The instinctive reaction is often panic, anger, self-doubt. But a Stoic asks, what if this is the best thing that could have happened? What if this shake-up leads to something better, an opportunity to pivot, start a business, or discover a passion long buried? To love your fate is not to enjoy being fired, but to see the event as necessary, as meaningful, and to meet it with openness instead of resistance. Many people, looking back, find that their greatest moments of growth came after such misfortunes. In the gym, this principle is experienced daily. Progress requires resistance. Without tension, without struggle, there is no strength. The athlete who embraces the pain of the workout, who welcomes the fatigue and strain, becomes stronger, not just in body but in mind. Amor fati in this context means saying yes to the hard days, yes to the soreness, yes to the grind, because you understand that this is the process. You are not just lifting weights, you are shaping character. The weight is not the enemy, it is the reason you grow. In mental health, Amor fati offers a profound shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" the Stoic asks, "How can I use this?" Depression, anxiety, heartbreak, none of these are trivial, but they are real, and they are part of the human condition. If we treat them as enemies to be destroyed, we often deepen our pain, but if we treat them as teachers, as parts of the path, they can become sources of depth, compassion, and wisdom. You may not choose the trauma you endured, but you can choose what meaning you extract from it. You can choose to make it part of your strength. Seneca once said that a wise person is like a skilled sailor who adjusts his sails to the winds, no matter how turbulent they are. Amor fati is this kind of navigation. The winds will never be perfect. Life will never go exactly according to plan, but the Stoic does not need it to. They adapt, they adjust, and most importantly, they keep sailing. This mindset is not passive, it is deeply active. It asks you to participate fully in your life, even when things fall apart, especially when they fall apart. Loving your fate doesn't mean pretending bad things are good. It doesn't mean denying pain or smiling through tragedy. It means seeing every experience as part of your story, part of your sculpting, part of your becoming. The heartbreak taught you to love more deeply. The betrayal taught you to value loyalty. The illness taught you to slow down and appreciate life. The failure taught you to be humble. Every piece has purpose if you choose to see it that way. One way to practice Amor fati daily is through reflection. At the end of each day, review what happened, not just the highlights, but the difficulties. What didn't go your way? What disappointed you? Then ask, what did this teach me? What strength did I use to get through it? What opportunity did it reveal? Over time, this mindset transforms frustration into fuel. You stop labeling events as good or bad. You just see them as necessary. This also applies to our relationships. People will disappoint us. They will act selfishly, speak harshly, forget our kindness, and we will do the same. But if we can see each encounter as part of our training, part of our shaping, then we can meet others with more grace. We can love the challenge of being patient. We can appreciate the test of forgiveness. Even conflict becomes an opportunity to grow. Amor fati means loving the full complexity of life, not just its joys but its difficulties. Ultimately, this mindset frees us from the endless cycle of wishing things were different. It invites us into reality, raw, unfiltered, beautiful in its imperfection. It's not about being stoic in the cold sense. It's about being alive, present, and empowered. Life doesn't happen to you. Life happens for you. Every scar, every detour, every loss, it's all part of the masterpiece. When you begin to live this way, not only does your suffering lessen, but your joy deepens, because you are no longer waiting for life to be perfect. you are loving it exactly as it is. Amor fati is the Stoics' final victory over fear, complaint and regret. It is the decision to live in full alignment with reality, to say yes to the entirety of existence. And in that yes we find peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of purpose. Not the stillness of control, but the stillness of acceptance. It is the fire that consumes everything and turns it into light. To love your fate is to love your life, and to love it fiercely, completely, and unconditionally. Conclusion: living the Stoic path, a discipline for life. As we arrive at the end of this journey through Stoicism, one thing becomes abundantly clear. Discipline is not merely a tool, it is the very essence of a meaningful life. To build unbreakable discipline is to build unbreakable character, and to build unbreakable character is to construct a fortress that stands tall amidst chaos, confusion, and the constant shifting of external circumstances. The Stoics never promised comfort, nor did they offer shortcuts. What they gave us instead was something infinitely more valuable, a framework for living with strength, clarity, and peace in a world that offers none of those things by default. In the beginning, we explored the Stoic understanding of control, learning that much of what causes our pain is the fruitless attempt to manipulate what lies beyond our reach. We do not control the actions of others, the unfolding of fate, or the tides of fortune. What we control, always, are our judgments, our actions, and our inner response. This realization is the root of all Stoic practice. It is both a sobering truth and an empowering one, for once we relinquish the illusion of control over the external, we discover the immense power we wield internally. We begin to train that inner force through reason, through habit, through repetition, until it becomes unshakable. We studied the lives and lessons of Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Cleanthes, and Musonius Rufus, not as abstract philosophers, but as examples of men who faced the very same struggles we do: pain, loss, betrayal, temptation, fear. Their wisdom was not forged in ivory towers, but in the arenas of life: exile, war, political persecution, illness, and the inescapable reality of death. What gave them the strength to endure was not supernatural power, it was discipline. It was practice. It was the relentless decision to return to virtue again and again, no matter the cost. Modern life may look different, but the soul of our challenges remains the same. The distractions have multiplied. The temptations are more subtle. The pace is faster, the noise louder, the values often inverted. We are told to chase pleasure, to avoid discomfort, to define ourselves by likes and followers and dollars. But beneath the surface we are still the same human beings. We still crave peace. We still struggle with fear. We still suffer when we feel powerless, purposeless, or disconnected. Stoicism does not erase these struggles, it illuminates them, and then teaches us how to master them through the cultivation of character. Throughout these lessons, we have learned that discipline is not about rigidity, but about alignment. It is not about suppressing emotion, but about directing it. It is not about punishment, but about practice. The gym becomes a metaphor for the soul. Each repetition is a rehearsal for life. Each drop of sweat becomes a testament to resilience. Each day we rise early, resist temptation, choose honesty over comfort, or respond to pain with patience, we are building something deeper than muscle. We are building moral strength. And this strength endures longer than any physique, any wealth, any worldly recognition. We also saw that discipline without compassion is brittle. The Stoic path is not a lonely one. It is rooted in community, in justice, in the understanding that we are all citizens of the same world. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that what is good for the hive is good for the bee. Discipline must be married to service. When we use our discipline to lift others, to be patient with them, to forgive them, to inspire them, we move beyond the self and step into a life of greater meaning. Our discipline becomes a light, not just for ourselves but for everyone we encounter. We learn to see adversity not as a curse but as a crucible. Just as fire tests gold, difficulty tests us. But the Stoic does not simply endure suffering, they use it. They extract meaning from it. They transform it into fuel. A failed business becomes a masterclass in humility. A broken relationship becomes a teacher of boundaries and self-worth. Illness becomes a portal to gratitude. The Stoic doesn't wait for life to become easier. They become stronger, wiser, and more grounded. They welcome the hard road because they know that on it, the soul is refined. In building discipline, we must also remember the centrality of reflection. No life can be mastered without the quiet moments of pause, moments where we ask, am I living according to my values? Did I respond with virtue? Where did I fall short? And how can I improve tomorrow? This daily audit of the soul is where wisdom sharpens. It's not enough to live. We must examine how we live. Stoicism is not a performance. It is a practice. It is something lived quietly, often invisibly, in the private decisions we make when no one is watching. Amor fati, the love of fate, reminded us that nothing is wasted. Every twist, every failure, every wound is part of the design. Even death, the Stoic says, is not an interruption of life, but its completion. By embracing the totality of our journey, not just the highlights, we move from resistance to acceptance, and from acceptance to love. This is the highest form of discipline, not merely to endure what life gives us, but to welcome it with open arms and a clear mind. It is the realization that everything is useful if we are willing to be taught. As we step away from this series and back into the routines and unpredictabilities of life, let this not be the end, but the beginning. Let the teachings of Stoicism serve as your armor, not to close you off from life, but to open you more fully to it. Let your discipline be like the roots of a tree, unseen but holding everything in place. Strong enough to weather the storm, flexible enough to bend with the wind, and deep enough to nourish your soul for years to come. The Stoic path is not glamorous. It will not trend on social media. It offers no applause, no dopamine spikes, no instant gratification. What it offers instead is something infinitely more lasting: peace in your mind, strength in your spirit, and meaning in your actions. It gives you your life, not the one others expect, not the one fear demands, but the one you were born to live. So take this discipline, nurture it, sharpen it, honor it, live it, and in doing so you will build something unbreakable, not just within yourself, but in the world around you.